Well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Um,
Here it is. It's on a different one.
were you able to find the link?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Well, yeah, because I think there was a different link out there on Google,
Boy.
but I think we found it.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Well, let me go back real quick. I was advancing my slides. Oops, there we go. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and start by introducing myself. My name is Katy Wilson, and I've been working with Academy Lafayette since 2018. And I have a background working in international baccalaureate programs in the Lee Summit School District. And so I came to Academy Lafayette and joined what they had started, and then which was the middle years program, which is what we're going to talk about primarily tonight. And then I helped start the high school and helped them develop the diploma program that takes place in grades 11 and 12. And so um, I've had a lot of different experiences with the IB program, and I have, the whole purpose of tonight is to help families, particularly who are new to Armour and have had little exposure to what we offer at the middle school in particular. And then I just want to give you a very quick overview of what happens once you come to high school and the different programming there. So, the middle years program is what your sixth grade students are automatically a part of when they join the Armour campus. And that middle years program lasts grades 6 through 10. And then we also offer the diploma program, which is the IB program that I think a lot of that's what IB is best known for. That's what most people know is the diploma program. And a lot of times it's compared to advanced placement courses. However, the diploma program is all encompassing. So in an AP program, students kind of select which courses they want to take, and there isn't really a full program that's developed behind that, although you could take multiple courses. Something that's different about the diploma program is there's components that are critical beyond the those rigorous college level courses. And then we are what is called a candidate school right now for the IB career related program. And that's what I've been spending a lot of time on in the last few months, helping our school get ready to find out if we could be authorized to start offering that program next year. And what that program offers students in grades 11 and 12 is the opportunity to take some of those college level diploma program type courses and earn college credit potentially in those courses, but then also choose a career pathway that happens outside of the IB programming that we have for students who are with us all day and complete a certificate and earn the career related program. So right now we are in what's called the authorization phase or the candidate phase, where we're working with IB to get some pieces in order. And then hopefully, if all things go well, we plan to offer that program next year. So I'm sharing that with you tonight just because there'll be more talk about that in the days, well, I should say the weeks to come, the next few months. And we're hoping that we'll be able to make the announcement later this spring that we are going to be offering that program at our high school as well. So tonight, I'm going to talk very generally, but like I said, mostly about the middle school because that's where most of our new families are. So the question a lot of times, of course, is what is an IB education? And I could go on and talk to you about it in detail, but to help you just kind of understand broadly, like whether you're talking about the diploma program and the career program or the middle years program in our middle school and high school, There are certain things that all of the programs are aiming to do. First of all, I think it's really important to remember that this is a worldwide network of schools. So there's IB schools all around the world and over 6,000. And all of them have a shared mission. So the schools have a mission that aligns with the IB mission. And if you look carefully at our mission, it aligns very carefully with this idea of empowering young people with the values and knowledge and skills to help create a better world. And so IB provides a framework for schools so that they can deliver. They're not telling us what to teach, but they deliver a framework for best practices and how to deliver a program with this mission in mind. So all programs and all IB students and teachers share the IB learner profile. There's a strive towards international mindedness. And then there's a curriculum that is connected and interconnected and it provides a balanced education, not just focused in STEM, not just focused in the arts, but really IB students are studying all subject areas equally. And although they can take things at different levels, once they get into those last couple of years, all parts of the program, all subjects are equally important and required. And then the IB also supports approaches to teaching skills and approaches to learning skills in their teachers and students. So I'm not going to go into detail in any of these very much in depth tonight, but I will touch on how this works within our school. So this is the IB learner profile. And, our sixth graders get introduced to it in multiple ways. And then it just kind of continues to grow through the years, and how students interact with these profile attributes changes over time. But this whole idea of the IB learner profile is that students from the very beginning of joining an IB school to the time that they're exiting the programs, these are the attributes that we're helping instill in our students, and they really fit with the kinds of tasks and questions and curriculum that schools build. And so at different times in the year and at different assessments or different units, teachers will emphasize different attributes and help students understand, how their lives and how their behaviors and their ways of thinking are connecting to this learner profile. But this learner profile is what really helps, when we go back to this, talk about the strive for international mindedness. So a lot of these characteristics are necessary if you're going to be working, if you're going to be thinking globally, if you are going to be meeting and talking to people from all over the world, if you are going to be exploring content through the lens of different global contexts. These profile attributes are necessary, and then also they are grown in individuals as they explore new concepts and new questions. We talk a lot about the importance of inquiry, and that in an IB school, if you go back to these different models, these are models of these three programs. At the center is the student, and the idea that all IB classrooms are student-centered and inquiry-based. You will see that our unit planners and the kinds of work that our students are doing in the classroom are centered around inquiry learning. And in order for students to become globally minded, they've got to ask questions and move in and out of risk-taking, thinking differently, reflecting on themselves, reflecting on their growing understanding, becoming more open-minded to new ideas, caring for people all around the world. I mean, these profile attributes are the things we talk about regularly in our classrooms as we take on challenging curriculum. Now, it's challenging in the sense that it's thought-provoking. It's challenging students to grow and learn. It's not so much that it's challenging academically, like that it's more difficult per se than you might find in a more traditional classroom or a traditional curriculum, but it's the idea that the inquiry is leading the learning, and the teacher is like acting as a guide as students interact with questions and new content and new ideas and so forth. So also in our curriculum building, our teachers are delivering units through global context. And so each unit has a global context in which the content is being delivered through. So rather than just exploring the short story in an English classroom, a teacher, as they're planning out the unit, they might select, they are required to select a global context to help like narrow down the focus at which they're going to explore that particular content, or the particular new skills that students will be learning. So each unit is organized to help students explore these different contexts. And you can see how some of them lend better to some subjects than others. But what's interesting is that every subject, in some way, each year explores each of these global contexts. So another way in which we are helping build, internationally minded, globally minded students is through, of course, language learning. And our middle school students come to us, in French immersion, and that continues through 8th grade. And then they begin also studying Spanish and Mandarin in 6th grade. And then they'll choose which of those two languages they want to focus on in the remainder of the MYP program, so through 10th grade. Our 9th grade students who join us in 9th grade don't necessarily have the French background, although some of them do. But many of them are learning French for their first time. Or maybe they've been studying Spanish or Mandarin at their former school, and they will also study Mandarin and Spanish when they come to 9th grade. But all of our high school students continue to study French or start studying French. And if they were studying Spanish in middle school or focused on Mandarin, that will continue through 10th grade. And then they have the option to, most of them continue French through the 4 years of high school. Many of them also continue studying Mandarin or Spanish. So I was mentioning the approaches to learning skills, and these skills, this isn't, anything that new or different, but what we really like about it at our school and the way that teachers find it beneficial is it's those, a lot of times they're referred to as soft skills, but it's those skills that we know students need in order to become self-regulated learners. So there's 5 areas within the approaches to learning. They're listed here: the communication, the social, the research, the self-management, the thinking. And every unit, teachers are focusing on 1 or 2 of these clusters. That's what those 5, the research, social, communication, self-management, thinking, those are the clusters. And then they drive down to specific skills. And students are, students are interacting with these skills through direct instruction from the teacher. And as time goes on, they start in 6th grade really learning how to do these things. And by the end, when they're in the 11th or 12th grade, because they've had these approaches to learning skills throughout their MYP program, when they join into the diploma program, they really are self-regulated learners. They know how to use these approaches to learning skills to take on some very challenging work, to think on their own. And so these approaches to learning skills, you won't necessarily see them on this first progress report, but on the semester progress reports, you will see teachers' comments and evaluation of how your child is progressing on these specific skills. And they're not just content, they're not just focused to certain subjects. All of our teachers, in most cases, a couple of them are harder for others, but all of our teachers are helping students build these skills within their specific subjects. So the middle years program, middle years program 6 through 10, these are the 8 subjects that all of our students are taking. And it's a lot, especially when you think about the fact that they're taking language and literature in both French and in English. And then they're also studying a third language. So they have their 4 core classes plus an additional core class, which is what we refer to as French. And then they're learning their third language. And then they're taking on, they're choosing kind of a pathway and interest in the arts. There's also this requirement in an MYP program that students become exposed to the design cycle as it pertains to lots of different contexts. So it might be design as it relates to computer science, as it relates to product design or digital design. We also have journalism in the high school that is taught through the design cycle. And so that's a unique requirement of the middle years program. And then lastly, the physical education and health subject. So no matter what grade you're in, 6 through 8 or 6 through 10, all students are participating in each of these subjects. Most of the time, I mean, not always all at the same time. We've kind of developed a schedule through semesters and quarters that provide a little bit more balance for students. But nonetheless, throughout a school year, they will experience all of these subjects. So each of the subjects, like we're looking at this list of subjects here, each one of these subjects has 4 criteria for which the teacher is responsible for delivering curriculum through, and then also assessing students on their progression through these criteria, like their learning progression. So if you look here at the arts, criterion A is where they're investigating and researching other works of art. They're developing their skills as artists. They're creating or performing these skills in a more formal way. And then the last one being evaluation, where they're evaluating their own work, they're evaluating the work of others. And so in all art classes, whether it's music, visual arts, theater, these are the criteria which students are being assessed. And it's the same thing with each of these other subjects. These are set criteria. They don't change year to year. You can always, in language and literature, criterion A is always going to be about analyzing the text, organizing your own responses to, your own texts, and then producing a text and thinking about audience and then using language appropriately. So you will find those same criteria in all 5 years of the MYP. It's important to recognize this as you start looking at, you probably noticed as you've started looking into Toddle and looking at student progress, the majority of scores are presented in the gradebook as being associated with one of these 4 criteria, or multiple at the same time. So this question comes up because although we have standards-based grading in our elementary school, the MYP grades still are different. And of course, the question is, what do MYP grades mean? There's no longer 1 through 4, now it's 1 through 8. The final score is out of 7. What does this mean? And I would get that question a lot, particularly when we were new to the MYP, like we just started delivering the MYP program. But my question would always be, what do any grades really mean? And if you have kids in other schools, or you've been in other schools, or if you could recall your own school experience, you can recall lots of different ways in which grades are being communicated to students. The A through F, of course, is the most traditional grading system that we're familiar with. Some schools use a 20-point scale, particularly internationally, a 100-point scale, some use, or 100-point percentages, some schools use. Um, they're oftentimes determined on a curve that a lot of times student behavior is factored in. The amount of effort or perceived effort that was put into something might be affected, might affect a grade, or a student's attendance might impact. It really depends on the school, and it really depends on the teacher, because even in the same school, same subject, the way that grades are being determined can be very different. I know I personally experienced that in a former school that I worked at. However, MYP grades mean the same thing all around the world. So it doesn't matter what school you're in or what part of the world you're in, you can count on the same thing. You can expect the same thing when it comes to assessment. So MYP grades are associated with students learning against international descriptors, and that's all based on those 4 criterion. They're measured against MYP defined subject-specific criteria, which I was showing you. It includes assessment over those 4 criteria in every subject. And then an overall level of achievement is determined after the student has practiced those 4 criteria multiple times, has been assessed on those criteria formally with summative assessments at least 2 times, and then a final score is determined. So here's an example of a PE 6th grade class, the criterion C, talking about applying and performing. So this is the 3rd criteria that a student is assessed on. And so every criteria teacher has a predetermined rubric that helps determine what they're looking for at each of these different levels. So we talk about those as being bands or achievement levels. So 7 and 8 being, of course, the highest level of achievement. And then each band, or each level kind of shows you the different expectation in order to meet that level. So the 7 and 8 level, especially to new families, I want to emphasize that 7 and 8 level really is beyond the expectation. It's not something that we should expect all of our students to be achieving all of the time. This is going beyond what's expected at the grade level. And a lot of times a student is demonstrating skills that go beyond what has been taught in the classroom. And they're able to demonstrate a level of knowledge or skill that goes beyond what they've been working on. So here looking at, here's another criterion A, analyzing, where we can see and the words in red are kind of highlighting the different highlighting what the teacher is looking for as they're trying to determine a student's level of achievement. So the difference between limited analysis versus perceptive analysis. And teachers are, as they're working with students and introducing them to rubrics, they're helping them understand these words and understanding what work might look like that is at that 7-8 level, and what work might look like at that 1 or 2 level, to help students see the difference in the skills, and to give them an idea of what to be working towards. So, and this is just kind of a brief summary of those 4 or the 8 different levels. And this is similar to what we saw in the 1 through 4 standards-based scoring in our elementary school. So you can kind of think of them in the same way. So that 3 or 4 level, and I know this is hard sometimes it's difficult sometimes, even still. I've been working in IB schools for a long time, and sometimes I still struggle with 3 or 4. That's halfway. That's only 50%. But you really have to look at the descriptions. And a student who is whose work is being assessed on a 3-4 level, they're meeting at least some of the expectations, grade level expectations. And once you move beyond that, you're demonstrating you are proficient consistently. So, and the Toddle grade book, and maybe you've heard your students talking about this, the differences between formative and summative assessment in the classroom. So teachers explain to students how formative assessment really is the learning, it's the practice. It is, they're getting feedback. They're getting scores on rubrics. They're getting notes from teachers. They're getting explanations from teachers. And all of that is to help them continue to learn and become more skilled and more knowledgeable in the criteria that they're working on. The summative assessment is what is used to assess a student's achievement level when determining a final grade. So teachers right now are preparing, are updating their grade books to reflect the student work that has been assessed. And they're, in the next week or two, they're going to be determining the quarter one achievement levels. And so they're looking primarily at the summative assessments and how students have performed on those assessments of those different achievement levels, and then using formative assessment to kind of help predict and better understand where a student is at this point in time. So primarily the summative assessments, and students know this, are the summative assessments are the tests, they're the projects, they're the essays, they're the final end product and design. Those are the most important points of information about a student's level of achievement. The formative assessment, although meaningful and helpful, have less impact on that final progress report, that final reporting score. So MYP progress reports, we don't average scores. So I'm just going to flip up a couple slides here. And this is just looking at a sample grade book over, we could even say over a year, because there's multiple summative assessments here. But you can see how a student's scores here are, they're up and down a little bit, but generally growing. And that's one. So when we talk about best fit grade determination, we're talking about not where the student was in the beginning, but looking really at the patterns and where the student is at the end. So you can see that this student has lower scores in those first couple summatives, and by the end, the scores are much higher. And the teacher is not going to average those scores or hold students accountable for what they didn't know or couldn't do in the beginning, but really look at what is the best fit, what score best describes where the student is at that point in time, at the time of the reporting period. So I'm going to go back to where I was here. So the thing that's great about this, as I was mentioning, it doesn't punish students for not knowing certain things in the beginning. They're not being held responsible for where they came in. But, rather than coming in sixth grade and maybe having really struggling at the beginning in math and not, maybe not putting in enough effort on homework and really getting those skills early on, those first few weeks of school when everything's new and so much is different. But instead, the teacher's looking at where the student is towards the end and using looking at what's the best fit for that moment in time. So a lot of times when I help teachers with this, we talk about the idea of, like, if you were to kind of predict, if you were to give the student another assessment, the next assessment, what would you predict that they would get? Well, most likely you're going to be looking at the last couple of assessments and kind of forgetting about where they were in the very beginning. And that's kind of that best fit prediction. So this really rewards them for what they've accomplished by the end versus, making them regret the learning that was happening or the steep learning curves at the beginning. This also helps students like better track their growth and think about where they've come versus, focus on where they are at this point rather than being too burdened by what they didn't know in the beginning. So this is that kind of that explanation of formative versus summative. And so we just kind of emphasize with the kids, formative is for learning, summative assessments are of learning. So you can always, we're going to have parent-teacher conferences at the end of October, and you can have these conversations with your students' teachers about what the trends you're seeing in formative versus summative, especially our newest or youngest students, are trying to figure out the importance of homework and studying. And it's through looking at the differences between the practice work and then the summative work that you can really get a solid picture of where, the needs of a student or the achievements of a student. And so having those conversations with the teacher are very beneficial. Okay, so we were looking at this. Again, this is like a sample grade book for any MYP class, but you can kind of see sometimes in some summatives, a teacher may only be assessing a couple of the criterion, especially in the younger years. You won't see teachers assessing them on all of the criteria regularly. You might even just see one or two here in the beginning. But eventually, over time, every criterion, there's a summative assessment that has happened at least twice, with many formative assessments in between. So I've talked a little bit about that OLA, the overall level of achievement. And this document has been posted on Toddle in our resources section. But I'm just going to kind of walk you through it real quick. So we're looking at, so this is that same criterion levels of achievement. So that 7 to 8 being the advanced, 1 or 2 being limited, currently below expectation. So this is an example class with the student's semester scores, could even be quarter scores. So what happens is the way this overall level of achievement, so that final semester grade is figured, is by adding the criterion scores together. So each criterion is out of 8, but when you add the achieved scores, and this is in my, hold on, I gotta move this so I can see it better. So 20 out of 32 here sounds like it's, not a great score until you look at how it's scaled on the 1 through 7 OLA. There we go. So the scores are added together and then automatically the OLA is determined. And so that if you go back here, that was 20 out of 32 points. When you look at the OLA achievement descriptors, that 20 points is an overall score of 5. And what's really important here is that you see the description that goes with that 5. So a student who's earning 20 out of 32 points, this description should describe the regular, the consistent work that the teacher sees. So generally high level with secure understanding, critical and creative thinking, sometimes with sophistication. These are very positive. This is a high achieving student. And so we also convert those scores in the progress report to letter grades. And I can't remember if this is the next slide or not, but it's definitely in the progress report. Let me go back. I don't think it is. But so in to help parents and to help students, particularly our high school students, as they're thinking about GPAs and preparing for college, thinking about letter grades. So these 1 through 7 scores convert to letter grades on our progress report. And I thought I had a slide for that, but I don't think I do. I can, but that I can show you that document here in a minute. But a 7 is a very high A, and a 6 is an A minus. A 5 is a B plus. This is all in the MYP. A 4 is a B, a 3 is a C, a 2 is a D, and then a 1 we consider failing, like it's not, have not produced very limited work. The work that's been produced shows limited learning, and so forth. So that's to kind of help you understand that number, the 1 through 7 numbering scale that, and this is something that the MYP requires, or IB requires MYP schools to communicate grades this way. And then we can use our local letter grades to convert. So Toddle is our new, we've been using ManageBack for a number of years to communicate grades and to communicate grades, but also deliver, to deliver lessons and have students complete work. In ManageBack now we're working in Toddle, and it works in a lot of ways similarly to the way Google Classroom worked, where students can work in Google Docs and teachers can upload templates and students can work on projects. What's